Hey, welcome everybody to Anxiety Unraveled, podcast brought to you by the Anxiety Resource Center out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, affectionately known as the ARC. The Anxiety Resource Center exists to provide help and support for anybody struggling with anxiety disorders. And I am so proud to have been a member of this organization for many, many years, and so happy to bring you this podcast. On Anxiety Unraveled, we dive into anxiety disorder. What are the tools that work for people? What are the tools that maybe don't work? We talk about personal experiences. We mainly get to the point that there is help and there is hope if you're a person struggling with anxiety disorder. And we hope to provide some insight into that so that in your journey, you can grab some tools that work for you. I am really excited to have Katie Achtyes as my guest today. Katie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mike.
So Katie is a therapist in West Michigan. She sees clients in West Michigan, also across the U.S. through virtual therapy and virtual support groups. Katie, you're also working for Michigan State University in the Department of Public Health in their virtual therapy research group that you're leading, which is awesome. And so you come with a lot of credentials on this topic of support groups. You're also a facilitator for a support group or a number of support groups at the Anxiety Resource Center.
Yes.
So I want to talk to you today about what those look like and what they are, and maybe take some of the mystery away for people. So
Great. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah,
awesome.
got a lot of
So
information.
let's just start with what is an anxiety disorder support group? Like, how would you define it? Like, what is it? If I'm a person that I've got panic disorder or I have
Mhm.
OCD or whatever my particular disorder is, and I'm struggling, and I've heard of support groups, how would you describe it?
Yes, a support group really just includes, particularly for anxiety. And currently, what we have right now with Anxiety Resource Center is that whether you are just noticing or others have noticed you are experiencing symptoms, and so then awareness comes to you, you know that you are struggling with. And there's a lot of different types of anxiety in terms of how symptoms are displayed, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. But once you identify that you have anxiety symptoms, they do not have to be diagnosed, or they can be, which I think is helpful because it separates it maybe from a therapy group where you actually have to hold a formal diagnosis. But for a support group, it's just either you or those near you, loved ones, are noticing, and you are hopefully noticing that you are really struggling. And yeah, it might be panic symptoms, just racing thoughts that are not stopping, intrusive thoughts, negative thoughts racing. And so, yeah, I think coming to a support group, the biggest piece is just knowing that you are not alone, that
Mhm.
others are struggling. And there is a lot of overlap in terms of how anxiety symptoms present, like in terms of as well as the different diagnoses that can be given. But usually, if you are in a support group, you're going to find somebody else who's struggling with the same symptoms that you are struggling with. And there's just something so validating about that, knowing that you're not alone and that you're not to blame. That this just happens. It's not something that you did to cause this, but
Yeah.
it's just something that happens.
Yeah, I know in my experience in being in support groups and even facilitating them in the early years of the ARC, that was the most powerful part for me is that it really was interesting to me because you'd have different, like you mentioned, you'd have people in the group with different forms of anxiety disorder. We had some folks that were, struggling with OCD.
Mhm.
And we had some folks that were really struggling with panic or, like you said, intrusive thoughts. But underneath all that, the symptoms were very relatable to each other. Like we could all understand what they were going through and how incredibly painful that can be. And that feeling of I'm alone, I'm the only one that is going through this is so debilitating. So that was one of the first things. What happens in the support group? Is it like each person has to share? Because you're often social anxiety, right? So if you're a person with social anxiety, you might be like, I don't want to get on a Zoom call with 12 people I don't know and
Yeah.
start talking.
Yes. Yeah. It can be very hard for people. So whether we are in person or yeah, virtually, in our online groups, I always welcome people with just, you know, first of all, letting them know like there is no judgment here. There is no bias here. And you are all so incredibly brave to be here. And that honestly, these groups could be so much larger than what they are. And sometimes it's anxiety itself that keeps people from coming.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I used to say, and I've said often, that it takes incredible courage to live a life if you're in acute anxiety disorder. The
Yeah.
These are the bravest people I've met in my life. And people without anxiety disorder don't understand the level of courage and just fortitude it takes to get through a single day. Um, Speaking as somebody who's had anxiety disorder my whole life, I've been very open about that in my life and my career. And thank God I have found tools throughout my life that have helped me live a life of relative peace and whatever moderate success I've had, despite having them. I'm never cured, but you don't have to live in the acute pain, right? I think that's
Yes.
the message, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Like you totally, yeah, took the words exactly what I was going to say, which is wonderful. It is exactly that. I think, for so long, people feel just stuck and trapped, and alone. And then the
Yeah.
shame that comes upon that. And I think, yeah, it's knowing like both things can be true at the same time. Yes, I may have anxiety, but yes, I may also have a life that I can live and still have quality of life and meaning in life, joy in life. Um, there's no
Yeah.
life that is
I
perfect.
think I think it's getting to the point where, for me, the turning point in my life was when I realized that yes, I'm a person with anxiety. I'm always going to be a person with anxiety, but anxiety is not interfering with my life anymore, right?
Yes.
It's there, but
Yes.
I call it the monster, right? I
Yeah.
call anxiety disorder the monster. And there was a time in my life, early in my 20s and late teens, early 20s, where that monster seemed huge and
Yes.
completely undefeatable. And
Yeah.
it's there now, but it's like really little. Like I look at I'm like, it's not that big a monster. Like so how in a support group, how is that different than therapy? I know that might be a misconception people have.
Definitely. I think it is. It's probably the first misconception that people might have. I think too, when people think of a group, yeah, they probably tend to think of, well, maybe two things. If they think of a support group, at first they might just think of silences, awkward silences. Maybe, people are afraid to talk. And while, yes, sometimes that happens, and it might happen sometimes in the beginning, again, that's why we've got really wonderful facilitators who can kind of help create and bring comfort. And then it kind of, yeah, it takes away that misconception because there are some people who it's like they've just have found relief where it's like, oh, I have a safe space with other people who understand me. This maybe allows me to talk. I feel comfortable actually talking, or I don't in other circumstances or situations. And then, yeah, the beauty of, I mean, and I love therapy groups and support groups, but I think the beauty in particular of a support group is that it is less structured and if you do not feel comfortable speaking at first, you do not have to. Permission for that is given right away. Um,
And everybody in the group understands that, right?
yeah,
That's what I saw. We
yes,
get it because we've been there. And I remember thinking, being in the support groups, and somebody was just frozen up, right? They did not, they couldn't, or weren't at a place where they felt like they could. I remember thinking that could be me next week, right? I'm an extroverted person, and today I'm engaged. Next week I could be right where you are, and so I completely get it. Like you have permission, not only permission, but no worries. Like just absorb them, right?
Yeah,
You're ready. We're ready.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too, I mean, if there is a group where maybe there's just fewer participants or it is more quiet, I mean, I think us facilitators, we come prepared too, so that there is material that will help either like create discussion or just I'll still utilize like therapeutic techniques in the groups as well, and then that
Yeah.
usually will promote more discussion. So, and then too, with a support group, at the end, I'll always encourage people to think of something, like what is something that you'd like to work on today or in the next week? But it's not like a formal homework where there's that
Right.
pressure, like a therapy group where you have to share, you have to talk, you have to have homework done, you have to show up. I think considering, especially with anxiety and how yeah, invasive it can be sometimes, or monstrous, like you say it can be. I think when there's not that expectation there, because those expectations typically increase anxiety, it helps to kind of decrease that anxiety, and people find more of a natural motivation to want to come. Um, and then, too, I mean, knowing that people are there because they want to be there versus having to be there is motivation not only for themselves but for others too. And I think there's an extra special healing element in a support group because people are there because they want to be there. Like it's their own motivation.
Yeah, I know. I think that's really important. You were talking about a couple of things there that really resonated with me. One is the encouragement in a support group to take that next step, which in my journey and in many journeys and just any study that you do on how do you live with anxiety disorder, they'll talk about cognitive behavioral therapy or the ability to face what you fear in manageable doses until the point where you're actually retraining the neural pathways in your brain, but
Yes.
you're desensitizing yourself, and then you realize you can do more than you thought and you can
Yeah.
continue to grow. I mean, I remember a time in my early life when I couldn't, I felt like I could not go to like a Meijer and get in a checkout line if there was more than one person ahead of me, right? I thought, well, what if I have a panic attack? There's people behind me, people in front of me. And I think of that now and it's inconceivable to me. Now that was 30 years ago, but
Yeah.
at that time it was very real.
Mhm.
And I really could not have gotten in a line with 10 people in front and 5 people behind.
Yeah.
But I could, and I did get into a line with 3 people ahead of me and a couple people behind me. And I realized,
Yeah.
okay, I'm anxious, but I didn't die. Like I'm still
Yeah.
here. I made it.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
and I kept doing that until all of a sudden I was along with 5 people. And then and
Yes.
that grew to, well, what if I'm in a traffic jam, right? Well, let's find a place where it's not going to be a 2 hour traffic jam, but let's find a place where traffic's a little and try that.
Yes.
And I continued to use that behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy
Mhm.
technique. That's one tool. The
Yes.
support group itself was another tool. Therapy was another tool.
Yes.
So I think, would you agree that these are all tools, right? It's not like
Yes.
therapy or support group. Yes, you find the tool mix that works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just like what you were saying, there are many, many tools. I think when we think of like the whole complete picture of life too, it's like there's many phases and many things that we do. And I think it's the same, with caring for anxiety or treating anxiety. There's not just one method that will make a person better. It's many, many methods and discovering, figuring those out. And certainly, I think when people are willing to, or have the courage to try a support group, that can be, a starting point for some people. And it's an avenue that then leads to additional ways that they can discover to
Yeah.
find symptom reduction, to find relief, to find hope, to find support, to find like value that they're cared for, that they hold a place on
Yeah,
this world.
absolutely. And I mean, in today will give talks on my journey with anxiety every once in a while for the ARC and in other places I've done this too, which in itself is funny because I also had social anxiety. So the fear of public speaking for me was there was a time where going into a meeting with four people would have been overwhelming for me to participate. And somehow over the decades, I get to the point where not only do I do public speaking, yeah, I ran a company with 350 people, and addressed I mean, just the progression is unbelievable. Like the
Yeah.
ability is there, but there were points in my life, if you're listening and you think I would never get in front of a group of people, you might. Like you're capable of more than you know. And the tool set, like, I mean, support groups, therapy, medication, exercise. For me,
Mhm.
my personal faith played a big role.
Mhm.
Um, and, cognitive behavioral therapy we talked about. There's mindfulness techniques, breathing
Mhm.
exercises, muscle relaxation.
Mhm.
There's so many things that you can do, and all you're doing is retraining these pathways that have become habitual in your brain.
Yes.
And I always like to say, I'm curious if you agree with this as a professional, because I'm just a layperson. I'm just a person with anxiety disorder, but I've always felt like, and I've used this phrase, I'm curious if you agree, say if you don't. I called it the monster. I've always told myself I created the monster, not on purpose, but I did. Um, and I have the power within me to kill the monster. Like I can undo it.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely believe that. And I think to pair even with that, there's another phrase, and I'm not sure of the author of it. It might be Glennon Doyle. I'll have to look at that again. But yeah, where it's like, do it afraid. Even if you're afraid to do something, if you're afraid to kill that monster, let's just start by taking one step towards the monster.
Yeah.
And you're going to be afraid, but we can still do things afraid. And that's what builds that courage
Yeah.
and power.
Yeah, there was somebody in the early support groups at the ARC back in the early days that used to, and this became kind of a mantra for some of the early groups, was I think it was like the only way around it is through it. Like
Yes.
we have to
Yes.
go through it.
Yes. Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. I do. I think, and with so many things, and anxiety, definitely. Especially how you said, like with the brain and how the brain is able to, yeah, like grow like new neural pathways and then like kind of like gain this sense of what we call baseline or habituating, where yeah, kind of that exposure therapy where, we try things little by little in a safe way, but continue to try, then the brain is able to reduce some of the fear associated with
Yeah.
that fear over
Yeah, the
time.
brain is an amazing thing. I mean, that's why I mentioned exercise and meditation and
Yeah.
um the
Yeah.
like say breathing exercises. You're physiologically changing your brain chemistry when you do that. And so
Yes.
when I realized this was like an epiphany, when I realized, oh my gosh, there's a physical activity I can do that physically changes my brain chemistry that makes me more relaxed. That it's not just theory. Like I can take certain actions that make me less anxious. And
Yes.
at first, it was just like a little bit less anxious. But then it occurred to me that if I could get a little bit less anxious, I bet if I found other tools and I continued this, I could get more or less anxious. And it
Yes.
was like that was an epiphany. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can actually
Mhm.
do something about this as opposed to being a victim because I felt like a victim. Like I felt like I'm
Yes.
trapped.
Yes. Absolutely. And that is so common. I think everyone who comes into the groups or yeah, who I've worked with on a therapeutic basis, like that is definitely how they feel. Trapped, alone, misunderstood, thinking people think of them as weak, incapable, and um
Yeah,
and
it's all
so
that stigma, right?
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and none of it's real. So I'm
mm-mm.
curious. You said people come in the groups. Have you seen, or can you, obviously without names, but can you relate for the audience, maybe some brief success stories of things you've seen for people that came to the group
Yes.
with that initial mindset like I had and like you described, and then you saw the growth over time?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think, first of all, when people are brave enough to come and they complete a group, it is like first even just that like um feeling of success of, oh my goodness, I did one thing I could do to overcome anxiety and I did it. And even if I didn't
Just by
speak that,
coming.
I
Yeah,
did it.
that's
Yes,
huge.
just by coming and being there. And then I think next, again, probably special to a support group versus a therapy group, there's just a special healing element of validation that is there because of knowing, okay, wow, others have this too. I'm not alone. And then that typically helps people to like, they're more open to hearing, okay, what do other people have? And what do they do to help them feel better, to manage that anxiety, to reduce that anxiety? So it's kind of this like flourishing effect that happens where people are end up sharing ideas, encouraging each other. And so then, yes, what I have seen in terms of success stories, I mean, it's amazing. People who have struggled with agoraphobia for a lifetime might suddenly be willing and have the courage just because of knowing the support group is there, and people who experience the same understand it, but maybe some who've also had agoraphobia have been able to get out of the house. So that's more encouraging to that person. So I've seen people with agoraphobia be able to go out of the house. Maybe
Yeah,
start just standing outside the door first, and eventually now, I know of a member, she's able to get in the car and go somewhere, which is huge.
yeah.
She wasn't able to see family for years, like for holidays or anything, and the guilt was just insurmountable. But now she has found a way to get in the car. She has someone drive her, but she can get in the car and she can go. I've
Yeah,
seen
that's
people
huge.
like, yeah, starting work again, school again, regaining, friendships, volunteering, just a sense of like self-courage, self-respect. I think of anyone that I've seen who, if they were able to come to the groups even at least 5 times, there has always been a sense of progress there.
That's amazing. That's a
Mhm.
really powerful statement. And
Mhm.
these groups are offered at very minimal cost at the Anxiety Resource Center. So, and I
Yes.
can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on, Katie, and just sharing your experience and the work you do for the ARC and the work you do for other support groups and the work you do in
Mhm.
therapy. It's so needed because, as you mentioned, when you're struggling in acute anxiety disorder, without the tools and without help, your
Yeah.
world gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you want to reverse that, right?
Yes.
And the tools are there to
Mhm.
do it. It's
Yeah.
one of the most treatable, if not the most treatable, of
Yes.
mental disorders.
Yes.
Um, but it takes some intentionality, right? And maybe that intentionality for you, if you're listening, is just showing up to a support group. Like,
Yes.
if you're interested in that, you can go to anxietyresourcecenter.org, anxietyresourcecenter.org. On the website, there are all the available support groups that you can join. There's virtual support groups. There will be, I think we're going to launch an in-person support group
Yeah.
coming up soon if you're
Yes.
in West Michigan and you want to do that. Um, and you have a chance. There are closed groups and open groups. Like a closed group is you're with the same group of people for a certain amount of time.
Yep.
Go to the website, check it out. If you have any questions at all, send an email. The email's on the website too, and someone will get back to you right away and be glad to help you. And Katie, thanks so much for being on and sharing your experience and for the great work you do.
Absolutely. No, happy to, yeah, be available and supportive. I think, yeah, this is so important and it's been wonderful. I started with Anxiety Resource Center in 2011 as a facilitator and was with them for a few years and had to take a break just with some family things and children. And then it was so great because, yeah, Suzette had asked me almost 3 years ago if I could rejoin again. And I'm like, yes, that would be wonderful.
Awesome.
It's been wonderful just to see the progress that people can make and just, yeah, facing those fears and facing those monsters. So I feel really blessed to be a part of the healing journey for people. So,
Well, God bless you for doing it. And Suzette, that you mentioned, if you don't know, Suzette is our executive director there. She's an incredibly caring person, and
yeah.
she will probably be the one reaching back out to you if you do contact the center. So
Yes.
thanks
Yes.
again for being on. Thanks everybody for being a part of the podcast, listening today. This is Anxiety Unraveled, brought to you by the Anxiety uh, Resource Center out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we will have more shows in the future. Stay tuned, like the show, follow the show, click on it, whatever you do. We'd love to see you back. Thanks again, Katie.
Thanks.